Hello guys, Ancient Gameplays, I'm Fabio Pisco and welcome to my channel. And yeah, here we are for the How to Adrenalin 2025. Yeah, let's call it How to Adrenalin 2025. I mean, it's almost 2025 and I'm pretty sure that most people will, will watch it through 2025 and will find it interesting, at least I hope so. Just do it! This is basically a video of me showing you the AMD settings and showing you what should you enable or not according to my experience and to the benchmarks that I have in my channel, and also showing you some videos that you could watch in order to understand how X or Y feature works, how should you make it work, if it is worth it or not, and etc, etc, etc. And by the way, if you don't really like long videos, well, you're in for a tough ride. Okay. But believe me, for most people this is actually an interesting video because I'll show you all and every single setting on the Radeon settings and what to enable or not. Like for example, you should really enable today's sponsor. Today's video sponsor is GVG Mall, bringing you lots of software deals like Windows 10, Windows 11, Office 2019 or 2021 with a new Windows 11 design, and for all of these you can use my SKG discount code for 30% off, getting a Windows 11 serial key for $22 and a Windows 10 one for only $15. Then use the key on your Windows settings and you'll have an activated system. Now as for the settings guys, let's start with the most important thing. Right click on your desktop and you'll have AMD Software Adrenalin Edition. Now we're doing with the 24.10.1, which is the drivers from October, so 24 is the year, 10 is the month, 1 is the revision in that same month. So yeah, you open it, and as soon as you open you have the home menu with several things like the global experience. As for now, you have the now recording tab because I've been recording with the app, now recording for 3 minutes, and I was actually recording with the app in order for you to see the options that we have. We have the push to talk, we have the camera as well. We can do scene switcher, for example, if you are, even if you're recording, but usually this is more usable while you're streaming, and you can do the scene switcher on the fly on the home menu. But well, on the home menu we have now the global experience, and several things have changed since the video that I made last year. Some menus have changed from one side to another, some have included new features, some just had a layout reconstruction, let's call it that, and the home menu is one of those with a global experience here, showing you the technologies that AMD has right now and the option to enable them if you want to, like HyperRX, the quality settings, the HyperRX Echo. For the cars that do not support HyperRX, you can enable HyperRX Echo, which is basically kind of a preset for your car that will make it use less power. Of course, the performance won't be as great, but anyway, it is what it is. Then you have, for example, the drivers and software, the AMD Assistant, which you can enable for auto-enable features and experiences based on actions performed on your PC, which I don't really advise. And by the way, the first time you open the software, it will ask you if you want to enable any kind of profile and so on. Just don't enable any kind of profile, just select custom and enable the profiles yourself. Then you have these menus for recording and so on. We take a screenshot, record a video, instant replay, instant GIF or GIF, I like to call it GIF. Then still on the window we have other things, like for example you have the notification bell, the notifications as you can see here that I'm recording. You have the AMD software survey if you really want to help AMD with some issues and so on. Then you have the settings, the first one that we're going into, the system, the configurations. And by the way, just letting you know about the AMD bug report tool. So if you're having issues with the AMD software and if you're complaining online, hey man, I'm having issues and damn, this is happening, this is not happening, blah 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 blah. Well, if you're not using the bug report tool, you're at least one part of the issue. Open the bug report tool and send your bug to AMD. This is the first step in order for them to actually fix the issue. I have direct contact with AMD right now, which is great. And by the way, thanks AMD for that. And anytime I kind of find driver issue and so on, I send it immediately to AMD in order for them to fix it ASAP. So you can select graphics, Ryzen Master, Smart Shift, the software that you're using, basically the application, then you select the affected game, the symptoms and so on. You just do it, you send it to AMD with a send report, and they'll fix it as soon as they can. So yeah, just do it. If you're having issues, just do it. If you don't really want to do this, when installing the software, check the box saying allow AMD basically to collect information from your software in order for them to receive these bug report tools automatically. Because if you really want the issues to be fixed, if you are having issues, of course, then you won't to do this. Otherwise, you're just complaining with no sense. Just don't do it. Don't do it. So finally, let's start with the settings, and we have several sub-tabs or sub-menus with the system, display, audio and video, hotkeys, Relive VR, and preferences. And we start with the system, and basically here it shows you all the hardware and driver options that you have. You can see the release notes for the software that you are currently using, in this case the 24.10.1. You can check for updates if you want to. As you can see, no updates. Then we have the preferred firmware version or software version. You can select in between recommended only and recommended plus optional. Then we have the check for updates. Once again, you can select manual or automatic with download drivers and software. For example, if you want to download the software, I believe that it will download everything, basically. Download software when it is available, maybe chipset drivers as well. I don't really know. I never use this option, so I don't really know. Here you can select recommended plus optional. The recommended only are basically the official drivers, while the optional ones are usual the drivers that are not beta but are kind of just a preview. We had some for some recent games. We had some for example, AFMF2, the preview drivers for AFMF2. So that's what it does. As for the snap settings, we have import and export, and what it says here is allows you to import or export a snapshot of your current settings in AMD Adrenalin Edition. So if you don't really want to forget the settings that you're using, you can actually export the settings and import them later, which is nice. Then you have the factory reset, which we all know what it does. Then we have reset game stats. This option will reset all the currently tracked game statistics within AMD Software Adrenalin Edition. This includes items such as last opened, play time, session time, and game performance information. If we go to the home menu and you go to the games part, you can see that we have the last games that we ran, like The Last of Us, Need for Speed, because my brother is testing a CPU here, Far Cry, Cyberpunk 2077, and we have the total minutes played and the average FPS. And here you can go and select, for example, the global experience. You can select the settings here, but we'll go into there. The issues reporting with launches the bug reporting tool. Once again, if you open it, it's the same thing as before. And the issues detection. Automatically launch bug report tool when issues such as BSOD, blue screen of death, and TDR, I don't really know what this is, or at least I don't really know what this means, or device installation errors are detected. So if you really want to report the bugs to AMD, you can do them automatically now. And then you have an option to go to About AMD Software Adrenalin Edition if you want to. And here, yeah, it is basically what it is. Hardware and drivers, and we have the hardware details. If you want to see the details of your card, you can see everything here, like the graphics. You have the usable memory, memory type, memory clock, memory bitrate, total memory bandwidth, if you just really want to see the bandwidth, the BIOS version. You have everything that you want to see here, even the PCI Express version and the current bus settings. If you have, let's say, an RX 6600, 6600 XT, 6650 XT, 7600 and 7600 XT, they will show you here as PCI Express 4 8 times, since the card has physically the size of the 16 lanes but only has 8 lanes connected, so that's the thing. And you can see the details for your CPU. They are way less, of course, but they're still here. Ryzen 5 7600X, processor speed, cores, threads, RAM, etc, etc. Now, as soon as we go to the display, we have global display, OLED, the current one that I have. I'll make a video on it soon as well. Thank you, KDC. This is a KDC monitor, 42 inches OLED, 4K 138Hz. The DisplayPort and AMD Radeon 7900 XTX, so meaning that I'm using a DisplayPort cable and then using the 7900 XTX. As for here, we have Adaptive Sync compatible, provides smooth responsive gameplay by updating the display as new frames become available, requires an AMD FreeSync compatible display. Now it shows the same for FreeSync and Adaptive Sync. In this case, if you have a FreeSync certified monitor, it will appear as FreeSync. If you have a FreeSync Premium certified monitor, it will appear as FreeSync Premium. And for really high-end monitors, like really top of the hill monitors, you have FreeSync Premium Pro, which is the best version of FreeSync. Recently they actually changed the certification, so the older FreeSync Pro ones changed to FreeSync only, the FreeSync Pro changed to FreeSync Premium or something like that, and then they had some new ones for FreeSync Premium Pro or something like that. And by the way, this FreeSync is to be enabled. In 2024 there's absolutely no reason, and in 2025 it will be exactly the same. There's no reason to not have adaptive sync or variable refresh rate, FreeSync, G-Sync. There's no reason to not have these technologies enabled. You need them enabled, period. Unless you have really bad issues somehow, like some flickering, black screen and so on. But if you have those issues when you enable variable refresh rate, then you might have to consider getting a new cable, a new display cable, maybe a really good DisplayPort one, a really good HDMI one, but I would prefer DisplayPort over HDMI. If you're having issues with HDMI, just move to DisplayPort, which will most likely fix the issue. But again, get a good cable, especially if you have a high resolution, high refresh rate panel. Okay, that's very important. Now we have Virtual Super Resolution, and Virtual Super Resolution VSR enhances visual fidelity by rendering games at resolutions higher than the native displayed resolution, and then downscaling to match the native displayed resolution. This process improves image quality, however, it may impact the gaming performance. To experience the benefits of VSR, select a resolution higher than your native displayed resolution, either in-game or through your operating system display settings. VSR is beneficial for games lacking anti-aliasing options or those with insufficient anti-aliasing. This is often seen in older gaming titles. Now, this means that as soon as we enable Virtual Super Resolution, we are able to go to the display settings here. For example, this monitor is 4K, so it only shows a maximum resolution of 4K. As soon as I enable Virtual Super Resolution, I will be able to select here in this same menu up to 8K, let's say, or at least higher resolutions than 4K. What it does here is that I can select higher resolutions, and then the drivers will downscale to fit all the pixels that we have here at 4K, meaning that we're gonna have more, well, at least a higher visual fidelity, usually, since we are putting more information in each pixel, making the overall quality, well, be better. And for older games, like it says here, for older games that don't support anti-aliasing, you'll have all those rough edges, really poor. All you can do is this, is basically just increase the native resolution and then downscale to your monitor's resolution. And since you have way more information per pixel, yeah, it just won't look as bad. The rough edges will be kind of smoothened out and the game overall will look better. But overall, this is not a thing that you really need to worry about by any chance. Yeah. And now we have GPU scaling. When enabled, the GPU will scale up lower resolutions to fit the display. When not enabled, displays typically handle scaling themselves. And yeah, you can select several things here, like the GPU scaling, and then you have the scaling mode, which is full panel or centered. And what this does is, for example, when you're running, let's say you're running a 21:9 monitor, so an ultra-wide monitor. As soon as you are running a game running at 16:9, so for example, you have a 1440p ultra-wide monitor, which is 3440 by 1440. As soon as you want to run normal 1440p, 2560 by 1440, the monitor usually will render the image with black bars on the sides. That's what usually happens, usually. Now, if you really want to go and select, for example, the full panel, what it will do is that it will stretch the image to the full panel, meaning that it will use 1440p, the normal 1440p 16:9, and it will stretch it to the 21:9 monitor. This is just an example, of course, but yeah, that's basically how it works, only the scaling mode. If you have this disabled, the monitor will handle it itself, and usually if you go to the monitor options, you have the option to select center display, stretched as well, so I wouldn't really bother with this unless you really want to play Counter-Strike 2 at really odd resolutions like 4:3 or 5:4 resolutions, and you want to stretch it out to your monitor. If you really want that, then maybe you need to enable GPU scaling, otherwise you're completely fine. And we also have integer scaling, which gives a crisp, pixelated look to images scaled to fit the display. Images that can't be scaled to match the display's exact size and shape will be centered on the screen. And now, integer scaling was something that was released, I believe, in the end of 2022 or something like that, and is a really interesting option for older games, since it kind of allows for higher pixel quality for games that don't support higher resolution, and this is very good. You can enable it for games like, let's say, World of Warcraft and so on. The older Age of Empires, although that we now have Age of Mythology retold, but for older games that don't really support higher resolutions, you can just use integer scaling and they will look much better. As you can see right now passing on the screen, it just looks much better overall, and it is a must for older games once again. Then we have the color depth, where you choose the color format to be used for your display. The higher the color depth, the higher the color accuracy or the color quality. If you can select 10 bits, just go for it. If you can select 12, just go for it, since it is even better. Although you won't really notice any difference in between 8, 10 or 12 bits unless you're using HDR. If you're using HDR, 10 bits is kind of a must, and if you have 12 bits, even better. And if you are doing, for example, some editing, 10 bits and 12 bits in terms of color accuracy, for example, in Photoshop and so on, are really relevant. But apart from those scenarios, in real world scenarios, apart from really specific workloads, it won't really make any difference. Then we have the pixel format, which chooses the pixel format used to encode images for the display. Usually we use the RGB, which is the 444 pixel format. But you can select other ones if you really want or need them somehow. Then we have the display color enhancement, which is also a thing that AMD added some time ago. Built-in profiles that improve clarity and color vibrancy of a displayed content. And then you have two options: the vivid gaming, which enhances overall brightness and colorfulness, basically saturation, and then you have dynamic contrast, which improves visibility of dimmed details. So again, disabled, vivid, dynamic. And apart from the color enhancement, we also have the custom colors, and you can enable or disable them, and then after enabling, you have several other menus or several other sliders where you can change the color temperatures, brightness, UE, contrast, and saturation. Basically, you can do these, but manually. We also have the color deficiency correction, accessibility mode that allows tweaking of colors for users who experience varying levels of color vision deficiency. Of course, you can enable, for example, protanopia, deuteranopia, or tritanopia. Like protanopia, color blindness, for blue color blindness, for green color blindness, and protanopia for red color blindness. On top of that, we have the custom resolution. So if you want to create a custom resolution for your games, you can do them. If you want to select, let's say, 21:9 resolution on your 16:9 monitor in order to have black bars on top and bottom to kind of do a more cinematic experience, you can do it. If you want to create a 4:3 or a 5:4 resolution here, you can do it as well. And then you have the display overrides as well, like the HDCP support, which controls support for high bandwidth display content protection standard. And on top of that, you have the AMD privacy view, which limits the visibility of spying eyes from seeing what is on your screen and so on. And this is actually an interesting tool that I never used, but I saw some videos about it, like the one passing right now on the screen, and it seems to be really interesting if you're really into the privacy thing. This one can actually be, again, interesting, but for the majority of users, this is something that they absolutely don't need. Absolutely. Going for the audio and video settings, we start with the audio settings with AMD Audio Noise Suppression. AMD Audio Noise Suppression uses machine learning to reduce background audio noise in real time. And as soon as you enable that background audio noise, and skip, I guess, you have the input device, the output device, and the processor selection. You can actually select your CPU or GPU as the processing unit of the noise suppression, since, for example, the current CPUs have AI cores as well, like the 7000 series, 8000 series, and 9000 series, so you can select your CPU or your GPU, and then you need to select the input device and the output device. Of course, if you are recording and you want the noise suppression to be on the input device, you can select on the input device, and if you are hearing some video or something like that which has a lot of background noise, you can select on the output device, and noise suppression will work on that video as well. But you have this video passing right now on the screen that I made some time ago about AMD noise suppression and how it works or not. As for the video profiles, they are the usual profiles that you see basically everywhere on every software of the video profiles. You have the default, Cinema Classic, Enhanced, Home Video, Outdoor, Sports, Vivid, and Custom. And as soon as you select Custom, you can select the custom brightness and so on. But this is basically what you see on every television, on every software. So it's, for me, again, it's useless. I was going to say it was useless, but yeah, I should say for me, it's useless. As for the hotkeys submenu, we have the option to use or not hotkeys, and these hotkeys serve for everything that you do. For example, like open sidebar, open full screen. For example, if I press Alt-Z, I believe that Alt-Z, my bad, Alt-Z, it will open, it will open the sidebar, as you can see here. If you want to select a different hotkey, you can just do it by clicking on this menu and select the key combination that you want to use. You can do it. As for the Relive VR, which is virtual reality, you can use it on Steam VR, meaning that you can indeed record the virtual reality gameplays if you want to, but you need to install Steam VR, I believe. And then if you want to see, you have some tutorials here of VR settings and how to set up your VR headset. I never used VR, especially with an AMD card, so I don't really know how it works, so I won't expand on this. And on the preferences, we have once again the enable or disable Steam VR. Then as for the general, we have the in-game overlay. If you don't have this option enabled, it won't appear inside your game. For example, the overlay that you have with the GPU utilization and so on, if you are using the Radeon overlay. I don't really use the Radeon overlay, I use MS Afterburner. Then you have web browser, you can enable or disable it. The system tray menu, which will make the software appear here, as you can see on the tray menu. Then you have advertisements, and the sole fact that AMD allows you to disable the advertisements on their software is really, really good, and they should be praised for that. I mean, not praised like, these are my new gods, AMD, but they should be praised at least a little for allowing you to disable advertisements, which is very important. As for the toast notifications, it's basically that small menu on the right top corner that shows you when you start the game, which AMD settings you are using for that game, like AFMF, Radeon Super Resolution, sharpness, and so on. If you are using one of those settings, it will appear there as enabled, active, inactive, whatever. So that's what it does. As for the game adjustment tracking and notifications, this was enabled like maybe half a year ago, and I don't really know what it does besides what it says it does, like the game adjustment tracking and notifications. And then you have the option to enable and disable tutorials the same way you can enable or disable advertisements. Then you have the language. The always on top disabled or enabled. If you enable this, it means that the software will be always on top of any folder. For example, if it is here, I open a folder, the folder is on top. if I enable the always on top, even if I move the folder like this, you can see the software is always on top. As soon as I disable it, yeah, the folder can be on top. Then we have the sidebar position. Once again, that sidebar that we have, when I pressed Alt-Z, you can select the position for the left side or right side. Then we have animations and effects, which I usually disable all the time, and AMD user experience program, and so on. So for my opinions here, what you should enable here basically is just the in-game overlay, the system train menu, the system tray menu, not the system training menu, and then we have the toast notifications. So these three options is what you should enable, and that's it. Now let's go to the second menu. So we have the home menu, where we've been before, and then we have the gaming menu. And this is different since the settings menu, for example, now we have the graphics settings on the gaming menu. And before, on the previous video that I made, were on the settings here, on the preferences here, alongside display and so on. And display was before on the gaming menu. So firstly, they went to the gaming menu and they took away display and graphics to the settings menu. And then they changed back the graphics to the gaming menu, but they kept the display here. Some changes, some small changes just for you to get some perspective. Gaming menu, and then the sub-menu of games, where you have all the games that you have, or at least the vast majority of games that you have on your system. They will appear here, and if you play them, as you saw on the home menu, they show it here. A total of 3 minutes and average FPS of 142, then 230 something, 105, 132. And here, as soon as you go to the games menu, it also allows you to enable specific settings for that game in particular. So if you want to enable Radeon Super Resolution only for Need for Speed Unbound, or AMD Fluid Motion Frames 2 only for Need for Speed Unbound, you can do it. It won't enable for all the games, but for this game in specific. But the really interesting part is on the graphic menu, on the graphic settings, where we have the global gaming experience with several presets, with the default, HyperRX, Echo, Quality, and HyperRX. And by the way, as for HyperRX is basically a feature that mixes together lots of the options that you're gonna see soon. Lots of options like Radeon Super Resolution, or in this case FSR if the game has an hyper-tuned profile, Radeon Super Resolution, AFMF2, Radeon Boost, anti-lag, all mixed in the same spot. And HyperRX is only available for the RX 7000 series RDNA 3 cards. So if you have an RX 5000, 6000, or even older GPUs than that, only the HyperRX Echo will be available. And in terms of AFMF2, it is only available for the RX 6000 and 7000 series as well. So HyperRX is not a feature per se, it is a mix of the other features that AMD already has. So let's continue. And that's why I told you to select the default and not any kind of preset, because as soon as you enable, for example, the HyperRX preset, it will automatically enable several options or several features that you don't really want to have. Especially if you're using FSR in-game and so on, you don't really want to use these features because you already have FSR and frame generation in-game, which is always better than the RSR and the FMF2 that you have inside the software. So go for default and select these settings manually according to your needs. That's the best thing you can do. So let's start with Radeon Super Resolution. Radeon Super Resolution is an in-driver upscaling feature powered by AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution. Users can now take advantage of Radeon Super Resolution to unleash new levels of performance on any game that runs in exclusive full screen mode. So it needs to run in exclusive full screen mode. The feature will be inactive until the user sets the in-game resolution lower than the monitor's native resolution. Radeon Super Resolution will automatically detect the resolution change and upscale to the native monitor resolution, delivering an extra performance for gamers to enjoy. So what Radeon Super Resolution does. Let's start what it is. Radeon Super Resolution is an upscaling technology, like FSR, like DLSS, like XeSS. What it is though is that it is an upscaling technology inside the driver, and since it is inside the driver, it can only be spatial upscaling and not temporal upscaling. FSR2, DLSS2, 3, FSR3, XeSS. All of those are temporal upscalers, which are considerably better than spatial upscalers. In terms of, for example, accuracy, in terms of many other things like image quality, they are better. Temporal upscaling is better. And Radeon Super Resolution, since it is on driver, uses once again spatial upscaling, meaning that it uses the FSR1 algorithm. So if you are using Radeon Super Resolution, you are actually using FSR1 on a driver level. And if you want to use this, you need to go to the game, select 1080p, and then enable Radeon Super Resolution, and the Radeon Super Resolution on the driver side will upscale from the 1080p that you are selecting in the game and then go to 1440p, upscale it to 1440p. The only thing is that the UI size and so on will be different. Meaning that if you enable FSR inside the game, you'll still have the same HUD, the same UI size and so on as 1440p, but you'll be rendering a much lower resolution. While if you enable RSR, you actually need to go into the game and select 1080p, and RSR will upscale to 1440p. My opinion, just turn it off and use FSR if you have it in game, which will be much better than RSR, since RSR uses the FSR1 algorithm spatial upscaling. So, big nope. As for AFMF, we have now the second version of AFMF, the updated version that wasn't on the previous How to Adrenalin video, because AFMF 1 was there, but not AFMF 2, that got a huge upgrade. And if you want to see, you can watch this video passing right now on the screen, where I test AFMF 2 and show you how to properly use AFMF 2. It is not hard, but some people just don't know how to use it and then complain about tearing and so on. AFMF 2 is actually much better than AFMF 1. But let's see what AMD says about it. Enhanced performance by utilizing frame generation technology to increase FPS beyond the in-game limits, resulting in a smoother experience, which is actually nice for games that have locked frame rates, like let's say Elden Ring and some others, where you can't really go above the 60 base frames, and with this scenario you can go up to 120 even if the game is locked, which is really great. The same goes for lossless scaling, which generally is better in terms of quality than AFMF 2, but in terms of latency, AFMF 2 is better, so it depends on what you want. Slightly more latency but better quality, go to lossless scaling, which is really good. If you want way lower latency with slightly less quality, then AFMF 2 is the way, and of course is free. AMD Fluid Motion Frames AFMF is supported in full-screen games running on OpenGL, Vulkan, the X11 and the X12 APIs with VSync disabled. That's why you lock the frames instead of using VSync. And by the way, the X12 and the X11 were already supported, but now they added OpenGL and Vulkan support with the AFMF 2. AFMF operates using frame generation technology outside of the game engine, of course, on driver level. You can now monitor the resulting FPS using the AMD Software Adrenalin Edition's performance metrics overlay, meaning that if you are using MSI Afterburner, for example, or any other metrics overlay, they won't be able to read the real FPS you're getting. You need to enable AMD's own metric software in order to see the final FPS that you're getting instead of the base FPS. Basically, that's how it works. As AFMF may introduce additional latency in games, it is recommended to utilize anti-lag for optimal performance. AFMF may not offer the best experience in fast-paced competitive titles, and some games may require manual activation of AFMF in the per-app settings. And basically, frame generation is not meant for fast-paced shooters, because AFMF adds latency, and for fast-paced shooters, especially really competitive players, they do not want any kind of additional latency, and that's why they are not prone to use AFMF, and even the in-game frame generation that usually has less latency than AFMF. So yeah, that's actually pretty nice that AMD tells you that. Then we have Radeon Anti-Lag, which reduces the lag between user inputs and visual responses by dynamically adjusting frame timing. Radeon Anti-Lag works best in GPU-limited scenarios, or should I say, Radeon Anti-Lag works in GPU-limited scenarios, because if you go to CPU-limited scenarios, it just makes nothing. We have Radeon anti-lag on the software. We have, once again, we have Radeon Anti-Lag Plus on the Radeon software as well, which AMD took away from us since some people were getting banned on Counter-Strike 2 or Counter-Strike Global Offensive or whatever. They were just getting banned and AMD just scratched it from the book, but it was a very, very good option. And I believe once again that AMD should leave anti-lag and anti-lag plus for single player games only. So they should not enable those for competitive games, but for single player games they should definitely make an anti-lag plus profile, which is way easier to do that than the in-game implementation, and it just works. But at least as of now, we have Radeon Anti-Lag 2 that will appear on the game options. We have some games with Anti-Lag 2 already, like Counter-Strike 2, Dota 2. I believe that Deadlock also has Anti-Lag 2, Ghost of Tsushima as well, God of War Ragnarok, and more games will bring Anti-Lag 2 as well, since it is a very nice addition when you're using, and especially when you're using frame generation. Imagine that you are using 1440p native resolution, but with frame generation in God of War Ragnarok. You can just go enable Anti-Lag 2 and you'll have way better latency, which is great. As for anti-lag, the normal anti-lag, should you enable it or not? Well, generally, not really. You should not enable Radeon anti-lag generally, as it can cause some stutters in games, and it can actually cause some issues here and there depending on the game you're running, like some kind of tearish feeling. It can cause some issues, and I've been seeing that across the years, that it can cause some issues. But in some other scenarios, for example, in games like Crysis, I believe that it was Crysis Remastered, when enabling ray tracing, the frame times were just completely messed up, and some other games have the same exact issue. The frame times were completely messed up, but as soon as I enabled Radeon Anti-Lag, the frame times were much better. I lost like 1 or 2 FPS, but the frame times were much better compared to what they were before. So the line was like this, with several spikes, and as soon as I enabled Radeon Anti-Lag, this one that you see here on the software, the frame spikes were really small compared to what we had before, so that's really great. So enable it only if you have issues or really bad frame spikes. Then we have Radeon Boost, which improves performance in supported games by real-time adjusting the resolution based on user input with minimal perceptible impact on image quality. Now let's start just here, because they're lying. Saying with minimal perceptible impact on image quality, this is just a full fat lie. Yeah, you can really notice the difference in quality, even if you just go here and you select the maximum resolution Jesus Christ, the maximum resolution change to 25, for example, and it is, yeah, it just doesn't work like that. For 33, for example, it just won't work great. And my opinion here on Radeon Boost is don't use it. Just don't. Radeon Boost is one of those technologies that I keep saying AMD and I keep saying users that is completely useless, and AMD should stop losing time doing things for Radeon Boost. It is just not, just useless. It's just not worth it, especially now that we have FSR and frame generation. What it does basically is, as soon as you move your camera really fast or you start running around, it will start rendering at a lower resolution. So imagine that you're gaming at 1080p and you select the 50% option or something like that, or the 33% option. As soon as you start moving really fast, it will decrease the resolution to, let's say, 960p or something like that. Let's just imagine, it's just an example, to 960p, for example. And as soon as you keep the camera static once again, it will go up to 1080p again. But I tested it, and as soon as you start moving, you can definitely notice the difference. And in some scenarios with the motion blur and so on, you can notice the pixelation on the hands, or the pixelation on the guns, or the pixelation here and there. So for me, big no. Radeon Boost, useless, don't use it. Now this one is really worth it, and it is Radeon Chill. Radeon Chill reduces the frame rate when the user is idle and instantly ramps it up when the action picks up, to conserve power and reduce heat. Radeon Chill introduces minimal input latency compared to other frame limiters, Listen to this. For a more consistent and smoother gaming experience, the idle and peak FPS can be set to a closer matching value. However, this may sacrifice some of the potential power savings for Radeon Chill. And I'm just gonna say it right away, Radeon Chill is a must for any casual competitive player, let's call them that, or any single player gamer like me, for example. It's a very low latency experience, and you can use Radeon Chill now with AMD Fluid Motion frames as well, meaning that it'll have like 8 milliseconds of latency even when using frame generation and Radeon Chill at the same time, which is great, very good. And using Radeon Chill is much better than using RTSS for limiting the frame rates and using other several techniques like frame rate target control or even the in-game frame limiters. Radeon Chill is much better. And Radeon Chill and anti-lag are different things, of course, but they work the same way. And when I mean that they work the same way is that they do the same thing. For example, Radeon anti-lag works in GPU bound scenarios, meaning that it will improve your frame times, or it should improve your frame times in GPU bound scenarios. And what Radeon Chill does is that as soon as you lock the frames, the GPU shouldn't be that GPU bound anymore, and the frame times will improve consistently. Imagine that you have a CPU bottleneck and your CPU is struggling to deliver, let's say, 100 FPS, and you're constantly, let's say, at 95, 100, 100 and something, 95 and so on. You go here to Radeon Chill and you lock your FPS to 90 or 85, and by doing that it means that your CPU won't be struggling to deliver those FPS. It will have some headroom, and the same will apply to the GPU, meaning that it'll have a way better frame time and a way smoother gameplay. I did that in some older games with my older CPUs like the Mafia Remastered and so on. I did that. I just used Radeon Chill to lock the frames to, let's say, a little below what I'm getting. If I'm getting 100 FPS, I will lock the FPS using Radeon Chill to, let's say, 90. If I have 160, I will lock the FPS to 130 or 140. If I have 200, I will lock it to a little bit below, of course, till I reach my maximum refresh rate. For example, if I have 200 FPS, I will lock it to 158, since my monitor has 160 Hz. If I'm playing here, since this monitor has 138 Hz, if I have 100 FPS, I'll lock to 90. If I have 200 FPS, I will lock to 136 Hz. So Radeon Chill, big yes. Just go here, and if you want to use it as a frame limiter, imagine that you want to lock frames to 90, just go 90 on the idle FPS and 90 on the peak FPS, and it will lock your FPS to 90, and it will be just a way smoother experience. Even if you're having traversal stutters, those stutters that we have in Unreal Engine 5 or when loading new areas, locking the FPS will help with those stutters as well. They'll be there, but they will be way less noticeable, so that's a very big plus. Radeon Chill for single player games, big fat yes. As for Radeon image sharpening, it adds clarity to in-game visuals and select productivity and media applications, and you can enable or disable it and then select the percentage of the sharpness, the strength of the sharpening effect, and you have from 10 to 100%. This is especially great for those games that have TAA, usually that have TAA, but kind of a really blurred out TAA, and you can apply a sharpness filter on top of that TAA without having to go to the game options, because some of those games don't have a sharpness filter. One game that I can clearly remember, for example, is Need for Speed 2015. If you go to that game, the sharpness, the blurred effect of the TAA is really big, and it can get annoying at lower resolution. So what you want to do is enable Radeon image sharpening and select, for example, 60 or 70%, and it will just look much better overall, much clearer, and a much more enjoyable experience to me. But generally, today's games, they have FSR, they have native FSR, native DLSS, and so on. So usually, if TAA is really bad, you can just enable native FSR or native DLSS or even native XeSS, and it will just look better. Or some other games, they do have a sharpness slider, so you can adjust the sharpness inside the game. But if you can't, you have the option to do it here with Radeon image sharpening. As for video upscale, upscaling video playback resolution and adjusting details for a better visual experience in the X11 applications, including Google Chrome, Microsoft Edge and Media Player. To enable the feature while your system is running on battery power, go to Video Playback, tab, Windows, blah 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 blah. If you just really want to see more about this, I also have a video right here passing on the screen about AMD video upscaling. In my opinion, it is not really worth it. I tested it like I did with a GeForce One, and I mean, for me, it isn't worth it. For you, it might be. For me, it isn't. So, video upscale for me, big no. Useless, don't use it. But if you really want to, it is here. You can enable it, and if you want to see how to enable it and what difference does it make, watch the video passing right now on the screen. And getting closer to the end, we have Radeon Enhanced Sync, an alternative VSync mode that minimizes visual tearing and lag but doesn't limit frame rates, works with both FreeSync and fixed refresh rate displays, doesn't affect applications using Radeon Super Resolution or AMD Fluid Motion frames. What Enhanced Sync does is basically what it says here. It allows you to go over your refresh rate without adding tearing, and this is actually great for people that really want to go above. For example, people playing Counter-Strike 2. You have a 144Hz monitor, but you are playing at, let's say, 240Hz. You can just enable Enhanced Sync and you won't have tearing. It also adds a bit more lag, but it does reduce the tearing. So instead of having those lines across the monitor, which is called tearing once again, basically disconnected images, one frame being disconnected from the other, Enhanced Sync can help with that. I tested Enhanced Sync before in monitors that don't have FreeSync, and it also actually works pretty decently. If you don't have VSync, you can use Enhanced Sync. If you have FreeSync, just use FreeSync over Enhanced Sync. But again, you can use FreeSync and Enhanced Sync together in order for you to not have tearing in refresh rates above your monitor. But still, personally, I wouldn't use it, and I don't. We also have the option to force VSync with wait for vertical refresh. Vertical refresh sync or VSync synchronizes the transition to a new frame or animation with a new display update, so no seam or tearing, as we were talking about before, is visible between frames. Caps the frame rate at the display's refresh rate. So the VSync basically caps the frame rate at your, as it says here, at your monitor's refresh rate. If you have 144, it will cap the FPS at 144. If you have a 60 Hz monitor, it will cap the FPS at 60. If you have a 100 Hz monitor, it will cap the FPS at 100 Hz. While Radeon Enhanced Sync allows it to go over or below that with no issues, with minimal tearing, and FreeSync ensures basically no tearing whatsoever as soon as you're inside the range of the FreeSync. For example, in 144Hz monitors, it is usually like from 30 or 45 to 144, which is actually great. Then you can select many other options like the anti-aliasing option. Anti-aliasing smooths object edges to reduce stair-step, artifacts or the jaggies, like I told you before, at the cost of some performance and VRAM memory usage. Specifies how the driver interacts with AA, anti-aliasing settings, in the game. Then you can select use application settings, which will use the application settings, obviously, enhanced application settings, or override application settings. Now, I believe that these settings of the anti-aliasing just work for the older APIs like the X9, the X10, and the X7 maybe, and the X8 I believe as well. And it doesn't work for the newer APIs like the X11, the X12, and Vulkan. I believe that's the case, but I won't really say it is because I don't really know, but take that in consideration. Then you have the anti-aliasing method with multi-sampling, adaptive multi-sampling, and super sampling. And the several methods are here. Multi-sampling, which is the well-known MSAA that we had before the TAA outbreak, let's call it that, with every single game using TAA, temporal anti-aliasing, targets only object edges. Then we have the adaptive multi-sampling, which is the adaptive MSAA, smooths both edges and transparent textures. And then we have the super sampling with a full scene, SAA or FSAA, covers every pixel for excellent quality but at a substantial performance cost. I never saw better quality with better performance. It just doesn't happen. What? Then we have the anisotropic filtering, also very well known. Anisotropic filtering. I keep saying anisotropic, I don't really know why. Anisotropic. Anisotropic filtering AF improves texture clarity while minimizing visual noise or sparkle, and you can enable it or disable it and then select the amount of it that you want. 2 times, 4 times, 8 times, 16 times. This is one of the settings that you keep at 16 times all the time, even in the game settings. It just doesn't make any sense to keep it at below 16 times. My opinion again. Then we have the texture filtering quality with controls optimization point for texture filtering. Standard is typically the best mix of image quality and performance. So we have standard, high, and performance. If you want to really push the high or instead of the standard or just use the performance, you can use it. But if you use the performance, the FPS that you'll gain will be basically none. And if you go for the high for better quality, you won't really notice as well in today's games. So again, not worth it, just keep it at standard and you're completely fine. Then we have the surface format optimization, which allows the driver to override the application and choose a more optimal texture format to improve performance. Typically has minimal impact on image quality. So if you really want to max out those FPS or really FPS by FPS, you can enable the surface format optimization. Will it make a huge difference? Will it make a noticeable difference? No. Will you really notice anything inside the game in terms of FPS or even in terms of quality? No. So again, another option that isn't really worth using. Just keep it disabled and change the options inside the game. Use FSR, use frame generation, whatever. These won't really make a difference. Unlike the tessellation mode, this one can really make the difference in some scenarios. Specifies how the driver interacts with tessellation settings inside the game. And for these you have AMD optimized, which is the standard, let's call it that. Use application settings or override application settings. You can select override application settings and you can go, for example, to off, 2 times, 4 times, 6 times, 8 times, 16 times, 32 times, and 64 times. With some older GPUs, like Polaris and Vega GPUs, like the RX 400 series and 500 series, and the Vega GPUs, in some games again that are very heavy in terms of tessellation, like some older Assassin's Creed games. Some older games that were really heavy in terms of tessellation. Crysis is one of those case scenarios. Those GPUs, Vega, basically any GPU, any AMD GPU before RDNA was really bad in terms of tessellation. So if you have a Vega or again RX 4000 and 5000 series GPUs like the 580, the 480 and so on, you can just go here to the maximum tessellation level and you can select, for example, 6, 4 times, 8 times tops, and in some case scenarios again like Crysis and so on, it might improve the performance considerably. This is what you want to do 4 times, 6 times or 8 times tops in some of those games and it will improve the performance slightly. Then we have OpenGL triple buffering, an alternative VSync mode exclusive for OpenGL applications that you can use if you are still having tearing or if you want more frame buffering in order for better smoothness, you can use OpenGL triple buffering. It will increase the latency, but at the same time it will increase the smoothness. Then we have the 10-bit pixel format, which enables the 10-bit OpenGL buffer support for compatible displays and 10-bit aware OpenGL applications. This feature is not compatible with HDR display capabilities. So this would be great for HDR displays, but it is not compatible according to AMD and basically works mostly for OpenGL applications that support the 10-bit pixel format. I don't really know for which users this is actually beneficial, but yeah, if you know, just leave it in the comment section. For me, it just doesn't really make sense to use these, but for some very specific scenarios, it can be worth it, I guess. And the final option is Reset Shader Cache, which clears the contents of disk-based shader cache. So if you want to clear the shader cache of your drivers, and the shader cache, what is the shader cache? Basically, when you're loading a game, the shaders are loading in the background. So in some games they load in the beginning of the game, but there are still some shaders that are loading as you play the game. So you'll have stutters in the beginning, but after loading the shaders, the game will run smooth. And that's what it does, loading the shaders. Now, if you're having some issues and you want to reset the shader cache to reload the shaders again, you can do it by performing the shader reset, and it will it will basically eliminate the shaders and reload them again as soon as you enter the game. That's what it does. As we move to advisors, yeah, it's basically a game advisor. Your system has excellent performance in The Last of Us Part 1. You may have some headroom for additional tweaking to improve image quality. So I was running at 1080p here to test the CPUs. So it actually shows me the graph with the frame time and the frame time percentile, which is actually nice. To see here, meaning that the software is basically telling me that I can increase visual quality, in this case increase resolution, since I have 144 FPS average, which is again very nice. Now we're moving to record and stream, where we have several sub-tabs. Once again, record, live stream, scene editor, media and settings, and again 1 hour and 14. Of course, the video length will be shorter because I'll be cutting some parts. These parts, it's everything. I talk crap all the video. But I mean, record sub-menu with the options to record, full screen, region, active window. You can record the microphone or camera, push to talk, all those basic settings that we have in almost every software. Then we have the live stream options, where you can select your account and connect it to the software, with once again the Microsoft level, the microphone level, push to talk, the scenes, and basically if you select, for example, if you go to the scene editor, you also have the chat here, by the way. If you go to the scene editor, you can select the layout that you want, the camera size, basically, yeah, the layout, the indicator, overlay, you can select the size, yeah, where you want it, and so on, so on, so on. Basically like any other streaming software and so on. As for the media, it shows the media that you have here. For example, today I had this recording, and as soon as you go to the settings of record and stream, this also changed. The settings for record and stream were also on here on the settings menu. So we had display, graphics, and we also had the stream and recording here as well. And now it is changed to record and stream and settings, which makes much more sense if you ask me. So we go to the record and stream, and then we have the settings for the record and stream. Makes complete sense to me. As for the settings themselves, we have available, for example, the ad accounts for several services, like once again Facebook, Restream, YouTube, Twitch, and so on. As for the settings, we have settings for recording and settings for live stream. We also have the settings for recording your desktop, which allows you to record your desktop, to show the indicator, which when you enable it, it will show the indicator here of the time that you've been recording, as you can see. The option to enable or disable the borderless region capture. And then you have the option to select several profiles in terms of recording, low, medium, and so on. I select the custom one, which is the one I want. For the resolution recorded, I select the in-game. As for the recording FPS, it also changed compared to the last year. Now we have the option to record at 30 and 60, like we had before, but we also have the option to record at 90 and 120 FPS. Now you might say, well, but I don't really want to record at 90 and 120 FPS because it makes no sense. YouTube doesn't really support 90 or 120 FPS, so what's the point? The point is that if you want to do some slow motion, for example, recording at 90 or 120 FPS is spectacular because you'll have more information. Since you recorded at 120 FPS, as soon as you do slow motion, you have double the information that you would have with 60. So instead of watching the slow motion go like this, stuttering, you have the slow motion going way smoother because you have double the frames recorded, which is very, very nice. Or if you just want to watch your gameplays in your monitor at 120 FPS, it also works. In my opinion, it is really great to have the addition of 90 and 120 FPS. Then you have the video bitrate. Usually people aim for higher resolutions for better quality, but if you have a higher resolution but your video bitrate is kind of low, the quality will suck. Explaining this on an easier way would be that the resolution is the amount of pixels that your recording has, while the video bitrate is what fills those pixels with information. So if you have lots of pixels, but you have no information to fill them with, As soon as you move the camera and so on, you'll have lots of artifacts, you'll have lots of squares that you see on videos. For example, if you see videos on YouTube with very poor quality, the resolution isn't the issue. The video bitrate is the issue, and that's why you see those squares appearing on videos and so on. You also have this video passing right now on the screen where I test several codecs, AVC, AGVC and AV1, and with several video bitrates as well, and you can see the difference in video bitrate and in terms of codecs as well. So video bitrate is very important. Video bitrate is the information that you send for the pixels. So if you have lots of pixels but you have lower video bitrate, the quality will suck. If you have lower resolution like 1080p for example, but a high video bitrate, maybe the clarity isn't as good, but in terms of actual quality, it will be better. That's why you need higher video bitrate. Now, if you're recording at 1080p or 1440p, 40 Mbps will be more than enough. I usually use 70 Mbps, or usually more than that depending on what I'm using. If I'm using, for example, recording at 120 FPS, I usually use the maximum settings, which I believe to be 100 Mbps, yes. That's one of the things that I would like AMD to improve, give the option to have more Mbps. As for the audio bitrate, usually 192 is enough, but if you can just select 320, yeah, it's even better. Since I usually record audio outside of the engine, yeah, 192 is more than enough, so yeah. As for the video encoding type, we have AVC, AGVC and AV1. Take notice that AV1 will only appear to the RX 7000 series GPUs, so if you have an RX 6000, an RX 5000, Vega card, Polaris card like the RX 400 and 500 series, AV1 won't appear to you because you don't really have the encoding hardware that the RX 7000 series have. So AV1 will only be happening or will only be showing for the RX 7000 series. But the other older cards will have AVC and usually AGVC as well. So AVC is the H.264, AGVC is H.265, and AV1 is, well, AV1. And quality-wise, it usually goes AVC is the worst quality, but easier to run. AGVC is the middle term in terms of quality and yeah, FPS taken, let's call it that. And AV1 is usually the best quality that you can get. In terms of FPS, it will be much more or less the same in between AV1 and AGVC, but AV1 will usually deliver the better quality. But you can see this video passing right now on the screen, as you can see, of me once again testing AGVC versus AVC versus AV1 in several scenarios and at several bitrates and resolutions, and I explain lots of these things like I did here with video encoding, Mbps, resolution and so on. So lay an eye on that video if you really want to know which codec should you use and at which video bitrate and so on. Yeah. Then we have the audio channels with automatic or stereo. Nothing new here. Separate microphone track, meaning that when you're recording and you're using the AMD Radeon software to record an audio track as well, you can just do a separate track for the audio, so have one video file and one audio file. That also works. Then you have the option to record or not the microphone, the microphone level, the push to talk option, and the audio boost with low and high. Audio boost is exactly what it says it does. It's the audio boost. You can boost your audio in certain dBs with off, low and high options. Then we have the live streaming options with the streaming profile set to low, medium, high, ultra, adaptive and so on. If you select, for example, low, it goes to 720p 30 fps, medium 720p 60 fps at 2.5 mbps, which is just crazy low, and at high it goes to 720p 60 fps and 3.5 mbps. And as you can see, as soon as it increases the resolution or the FPS, it also increases the video bitrate, otherwise you don't have enough information to fill the pixels. As soon as we go to Ultra, it goes to 1080p 60 FPS, and as we increase the resolution, it also increases the video bitrate. Usually, I would say that if you're using Twitch or something, it has like a maximum video bitrate of 8, but if you're using YouTube, it allows a way higher video bitrate. So if you're going at 1080p, I would go for something like at least 20 Mbps. If you go to upload at 1440p, I would go to something like 40 Mbps with the audio bitrate at 192, of course. Now, as for streaming on the AMD Radeon software, it only uses the AVC codec. So even if you select here AGVC, AV1 and so on, it will still use AVC, but this is for the AMD software. So if you are using any other software like the Streamlabs OBS, if you are using OBS, the normal OBS, meaning that in terms of streaming on the AMD software, you can only use the AVC codec, which is the worst one. But now, some time ago, they actually added the enhanced filtering option, which improves encoding compression and resulting image quality through filtering of imperceptible details from source image. Meaning that if you enable this, the overall quality will be much better, but will still be much worse than using AGVC or AV1 codec. And since now YouTube supports AV1, well, it supports AV1 for quite a long time, but now even Twitch supports AV1, so yeah, it makes no sense to have this here and still streaming with AVC. But yeah, you can use once again OBS or Streamlabs OBS or Streamlabs something, they changed the name, doesn't really matter, and you can actually just stream with AV1 from your AMD card, which will deliver a much better image quality. And the final settings in this sub-tab is basically the media save location where you save your recordings, the instant replay option which allows you to instantly save a video of a predefined duration of your last gaming moment, which you can enable or not. By the way, if you're having issues, and I repeat, if you're having issues with high idle power, you should disable instant replay, instant GIF or instant GIF or in-game replay and disable and enable, by the way, the FreeSync if you are having those issues. And we also have the instant GIF, again allows you to instantly save an animated GIF of a predefined duration of your last gaming moment, and then you have the in-game replay, while in-game allows you to instantly play back a video of your last gaming moment. And then, yeah, you can select the audio capture device for your gameplays. In this case, the default, which is now the analog audio, blah, blah, blah. Doesn't really matter. And after 1.5 hours, yeah, we have the performance tab with the metrics, tuning and settings sub-tab, with the metrics being the metrics for your Radeon overlay that you see in game, like passing right now on the screen on the game body cam, where you can select several options like the FPS, latency and so on, and yeah, you can select them here, FPS, latency and so on, and they will appear like that you saw on the bodycam gameplay footage. But yeah, I can enable it just for you to see. As soon as I enable it, it will appear there, FPS and so on and so on. You can select if you want to have graphics or not. Yeah, you have several options. Then you have the tuning tab where you can actually tune your CPU if you want to, or your GPU. Usually I don't really tune the CPU here, I just go to BIOS, it is much better. If you want to know how to overclock or undervolt your CPU, you have this video passing right now on the screen, overclocking, undervolting basically every single Ryzen CPU. If you want to overclock your GPU or undervolt it or do whatever you want, you also have these settings, and you see here 97 watts or 77 watts because I'm recording at 4K and that's why the GPU is using so much power. Otherwise it would be at like 20 watts idle or something like that. And if you want to see these settings, I have videos for almost every single AMD GPU out there, from the 4000 series like 580, 480, 570, like 5700 XT, 7600, 7600 XT, the 6000 series as well, like the 6800, almost every GPU that AMD has released in the past couple of years, I have an overclocking and undervolting tutorial for it. So go to my video section, search for those videos and they will appear. They'll be there. The last sub-tab is the settings sub-tab with a graphic duration. You can select the settings of the graphic duration, enable metrics overlay, and then you have the performance logging location and the option to hide the metrics overlay during logging, which is nothing new. And the final tab that we have here is the smart technology, which is also a thing that they added compared to the 2023 version, which basically puts together all the smart technologies that AMD has, like in this case AMD noise suppression, where you can enable or disable, AMD privacy view that you can install right from here, the AMD Access Smart Access video that somehow isn't here, maximizes compression speed faster than real time. AMD Smart Access video was an option that they were working on, And I believe that it still works in some systems, but you need to have a specific CPU and GPU for it to work, I believe. And the AMD Smart Access Memory is basically what we all know, SAM Smart Access Memory, which improves dramatically the performance in some games. And when I say dramatically, I really mean it, dramatically. So it is important to always have it enabled. And well guys, I guess that's all for this video. 1.5 hours recording, maybe the video will be more than an hour, sorry about that. And if you were crazy enough to watch the full video, leave your comment in the comment section telling me that you watched the full video. You were crazy enough to do it. Again, I tried to explain things the best way I can. In some case scenarios, I actually didn't do some benchmarks, but I sent you to some videos that I made before that have benchmarks for you to see. And yeah, I guess that's all for the Radeon Adrenalin software kit, where we have several menus, several options. Some are really worth it, some are not. We have some options that shouldn't be used because they are not really worth it, they make no sense to be used, and we have some other options, some other features that are really, really good. Some for older GPUs only, some for newer GPUs like AFMF2, for example. AFMF2 is very good in some specific scenarios. Not all games, but in some games it is very, very good. Radeon Boost, once again, useless. Some other settings like the tessellation options for older GPUs can also help, so it kind of depends. It kind of depends on the GPU that you're using, but I believe that I explained the best way I could. If you still have any doubts, leave them in the comment section, and as always, I'll answer as fast as I can. Thank you very much for watching the video. Leave your comment in the comment section again, because that also helps the channel, and see you in the next video, guys. And by the way, I'll be doing an how to GeForce, let's call it that, how to GeForce tutorial as well, since the new Nvidia app is now official. So I'll be doing a tutorial the same way I did for this AMD software. Thank you very much once again, and see you in the next video, guys. Cheers.